Welcome to the Youth Voice, a politics podcast giving young people a voice in politics across the island of Ireland. Today we're joined by James Main and Matthew Spears from the BeyondNI podcast. So welcome to the show, guys.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah,
So
thanks for inviting us.
I was on your show a couple of months ago, and it was really great. So thanks for coming on mine. But I suppose we'll get straight in. Why don't you actually tell our listeners a bit more about BeyondNI? What's the purpose? What does the idea come from?
Not to be cynical, but BeyondNI came about for me having a mental breakdown one night because I didn't know what I was doing with my life. So it was sort of, trying to be sort of entrepreneurial with politics in this part of the world. And I thought, well, he's a bigger geek than me when it comes to politics to help. So I got Matt on board, and it's been a beautiful partnership ever since. But in terms of like the data side of it, I think Matt's better really explaining that element because he really took charge there.
So I think our kind of first project with it and the kind of thing which we did before we kind of even approached doing the website was doing like kind of a right left kind of analysis of the political parties here. And that's kind of just what we focused on for a while. And then that kind of led on to our idea of, well, why don't we make just a website that kind of focuses just not purely, but that focuses on like kind of policy stuff. It kind of focuses on Northern Irish policy, what you could do better, what right left politics kind of is in Northern Ireland, because I don't feel like people always know that very well. And that's kind of what it just became, I guess, unless James has anything else to say about it.
Yeah, it was just really going to add, I think on a basic level, people in this part of the world, the Northern Ireland, whatever you would like to call it, people have a very basic understanding of, well, this party is, nationalist or unionist, so that's why I vote for them. But when you break down, okay, then what's the economic policy of, let's say, the DUP or Sinn Féin, people then start to be like, oh, I don't really know. And especially when you break down society into class or gender, this is where you start maybe to see how the unionism, nationalism, or other sort of carve up doesn't really, solve a lot of the political problems, and a lot of people are stigmatized from the political process. So for us, it was trying to highlight, what do these parties actually think, and also analyze it on a different political, line. So it was just trying to get that information out there and make it more clear.
Brilliant. I know flicking through the website has been a source for loads of my information now for, all of my interviews. I just kind of flick through and, oh, that's true, I'll use that. But I suppose one of the things I also want to say, we've seen BeyondNI. What about Beyond ROI or Beyond UK or Beyond US? We ever going to see something like that?
I think, I think it's possible. I think we have talked about it in the past. I think at the moment we're very focused on just getting our audience here and trying to figure out how to build it out properly and do the kind of behind the scenes stuff from Northern Ireland right now. But then I think in the future, I think there's definitely us kind of thinking about even doing other possible societies that are kind of similar to Northern Ireland who maybe are divided in very deep ways. But yeah, I know that James probably wants it beyond Kosovo, but we'll have to see if that's possible.
Yeah, for anybody who's never heard of this strange country in the middle of the Balkans, I went there on an international summer academy. I was selected to be one of the people representing here, and it was essentially if you took Northern Ireland and placed it in the middle of the Balkans, and everybody was Albanian and Serbian with different flags flying. So yeah, in terms of the start of your question about if we're ever going to see a Beyond ROI, Beyond Ireland, Beyond UK, I think it's definitely on the cards, but we sort of need more people. It's only me and Matt running this. Both of us have full-time jobs. I'm exhausted. Matt's even more exhausted. So yeah, if we get more people on board, we're definitely going to expand and just keep doing our version of analysis and decent reporting that hopefully breaks through the media fatigue people are having with a lot of their news sources.
Brilliant. I suppose I actually want to kind of get into your actual analytical stuff. So, one of the things that I noticed, I was just flicking through earlier, was how the SDLP would fall further left than Sinn Féin. And I find that interesting because, whereas the SDLP might market themselves as social democratic, Sinn Féin considers themselves quite hard socialists. So I was kind of interested in actually seeing, where did that kind of come from, rather than the kind of idea that the Shinners would be kind of quite hard left and then the SDLP would be more centre.
I think from a historical context, you would have been right in that analysis, and to some degree still are. But from what our findings were, especially when it comes to voting history and how mandatory coalition works, you have to see the likes of Sinn Féin working with the right-wing DUP. So concessions have to be made there. And a lot of our analysis was from 2011 onwards. So you have to remember then also there was a time when there was that was the first time Stormont had an opposition government with the UUP alliance and SDLP pulling out. So that bit of freedom allows the likes of the SDLP to maybe critique the Sinn Féin DUP partnership in a more leftist way. In terms of the political theory aspect when it comes to the manifestos, for Sinn Féin stating themselves as a socialist party, they do not mention socialism once in their manifesto. They do not mention Marxism once. It is only on the fringe of their imagery that you will see it. And even then, I would question within their own base, not maybe members, but voters, are they even left wing, especially when we talk about elements of nationalism. And I mean that in the nicest way possible, of once you take yourself away from this island and the ideologue and history of Irish nationalism and just nationalism in general that we're seeing in quite a bit in Western Europe. I wonder if there's a certain right-wing connotation to a stronger island, which rejects the ideas of, Marxism. And, we're seeing that already with some groups. Like, look at Antu, all of a sudden that are popping up. I wouldn't be surprised. That's why SDLP come out slightly more left on our scale. Doesn't always mean that they will be to the left of Sinn Féin on every issue, but this is just a rough, not a perfect metric that we're using. Matt, do you feel like you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I guess I think one of the things that I would say is now with Sinn Féin's size, the size that they are in terms of how many MLAs they have, how wide of a supporter base they can tend to have. I think then in the ways that they approach elections and the way they now approach voting is very different to the way it used to be, where now they want to win. They have a massive focus on winning campaigns, winning elections, winning it on both sides of the border. So I don't think they can be as left-wing as they used to be. I just don't think that's possible. If you want to be as big a party as they want to be. And their first goal, and we all know their first goal is not to be a left-wing party. Their first goal is to be a nationalist party, which I don't think is very controversial to say. So I think for them, leaving behind some of the left-wing ideas is fine, as long as it builds towards their goal of building up a nationalist position. And then whenever I look at the SDLP, I see a party who's a wee bit freer, who can kind of decide for themselves a wee bit more what their ideology is. And even though I don't think, I think you have to look at our analysis and understand it's not like this applies 100% of the time. But I think that, yeah, the SDLP just have a freedom that the Sinn Féin doesn't have right now in terms of ideology, possibly. And
maybe if we see the SDLP get more voters, you might see that this trend of centrism go back. Yeah. We actually had Oisin Donnelly on the other day, and he put it really well that for years the SDLP was sort of the broad church for nationalism in the North, and henceforth had to incorporate a lot of ideas. But then if you look at the likes of John Hume and all, there's some very, very socialistic ideas in there, and obviously being the Labour Party's base in the North for years, you can still see that to a degree. So history can only, or not history, the future will only tell which way both of those parties will go.
Absolutely. I suppose another kind of interesting view on that is as well, whenever you look at the unionist nationalist divide, you will see an almost a trend where unionism kind of shoots to the right, whereas nationalism is quite on the left. One reason I'd seen kind of put forward for this was the idea that unionism has its roots steeped in imperialism, which is by effect right wing and is not compatible with left wing ideology. But is that something you'd agree with in terms of that?
I think that is definitely a factor in it. I think that is a key factor. I think, but in terms of unionism, I would also say that they have the, if we just even look historically, I think you have to look at it as them coming from the position of power, the position of stability, the position of basically wanting to conserve something. They want to conserve the union, and they also want to keep things the way they are, to some degree. And that's kind of the way that a conservative ideology works, because you want to conserve, you want to keep things the way they are, you want to keep the union in the unionist case, but and obviously in the UK, it's keeping society. For let's say like a conservative stance in the UK is, I want to keep society the same way by making small changes just so we can keep on going. And Northern Ireland conservatism would be, we want to keep the union. So that's I think why they have like a shift towards the right. And actually, I mean, unionism has deep roots with the Conservative Party in the UK as well. So they're both right. So I think a right wing trend of ideas happens there, where they just exchange like some kind of kinship in the past. I don't know if James has any other takes on that, but
Yeah, I think from a personal standpoint, the ideology of the thinking of left wing unionism is something I thought about for, God, I think this obsession started 5, maybe 6 years ago. So it's one I've thought deeply on, and I've came to a few conclusions in my time on it. Number one, I think you are right. Historically, it has been more conservative in nature. But I think that's when you just look at it solely from a unionist standpoint and nothing about the other matters of society. So if you look then at maybe class workings within Belfast and the Dockers from the 1920s onwards, you do see strong labour movements within the Protestant workforce, who would, let's be real, most likely be unionist in their outlook. And then what I see the problem with unionism now with their parties is what Matt said. They want stability. They want things to be the way they are. They want the status quo, is what I'm trying to say. So of course you're going to be slightly more conservative in that mindset. But then I think for modern unionists, and especially for younger people of our generation, we're the first generation to grow up properly with the internet by our side, so millennials and younger. So we're seeing a lot more international news. We're beyond the troubles. We're looking at better parts of the world and thinking, why can't we be like that? And I wouldn't be surprised, and I know some Alliance people might call me out for this, if a significant portion of their base is of a unionist mindset, but left-wing in their outlook. And I think simply to call all unionists right-wing, and I understand because the UUP are, centristic with a bit of right and a bit of left, DUP and TUV both hard right. I would say that simplification is fair enough, but once you dig deeper, it's too much of a broad house.
yeah,
You have the likes of the PUP and David Irvine and Billy Hutchinson, who show very much lefty sort of roots and socialism and everything, but they just want to see socialism within the UK.
yeah.
So that's my take on it. I probably missed out a point or two, but yeah.
I think that's a good point. I think in terms of like the left wing aspect with the nationalism, I think you're looking at. I think you would have to go back to, again, I'm being probably the boring dude who talks about history, but here we are. I think I would say that you'd have to look at where the idea of revolution comes from in terms of like political ideology. It's a Marxist idea, or in general, whenever you're looking back to whenever the kind of Irish Revolution's happening, it's obviously Marxist. It's thinking of, needing to change the world in a very drastic way. So I think you then obviously, just through kind of like the way that then you're socialized and the way that you kind of view history, I think that nationalism obviously does have, or Irish nationalism obviously does have such strong roots to the revolution. That also means that it has such strong roots then to also an ideology which is indefinitely left wing. But I think that also can be a little bit reductive, because it's as
It's
James was saying
100 years
about,
from partition, so
yeah,
things change.
yeah. I think I don't know if you just want to keep us let us keep on talking, because I gotta go all day, but
Go for it.
I think whenever then you have to deal with like why we have such like a strong divide, I think you have to look at two things. I think the conflict radicalizes politics. I think any form of conflict will radicalize you in terms of your political view, especially whenever it's with people who are so close, you have to live so close with. And then you have the divide, like whenever you don't have the chance to even talk to people of another community, the ideas, you don't get to like shift your ideas, you don't get to talk to people about other political ideologies. And then you kind of get surrounded in your own wee echo chambers. I know that we talk about kind of digital echo chambers. Northern Ireland effectively has or had physical echo chambers for an awful long time in terms of political ideologies, where ideas weren't very easy to go across community lines. So I think we all just got to build into our own wee ecosystems. I think only now, kind of in the past like 2 decades, have we seen more ability to kind of have a little bit more diversity and a wee bit more interchange between communities of ideas, possibly.
Absolutely. I suppose I actually want to draw on something you said, James, the kind of the alliance, unionism kind of idea. And I suppose it is something I've seen myself, just kind of talking to alliance voters where many of them will be either quite quiet unionists, to be small U unionists, and kind of this idea of united community. But there is also the idea, especially prevalent in kind of Republican nationalist communities, that alliance by default is a unionist party because of the fact that it, I suppose, achieves the status quo, and it wants to make Northern Ireland work and make Northern Ireland work within the United Kingdom. So I want to actually hear your thoughts on that idea, or is alliance actually that kind of broad church that takes in everybody?
I don't know if I would specifically state alliance as a unionist party. I can understand why nationalists would say that, though, because if you look at the history of alliance, essentially they were born out of being the left-wing group of the UUP. And if you look at some of their early election material, it's very much, without Britain, we're sunk sort of thing. It's only been from the 90s onwards, I believe, where this other sort of branding has came about. I think for unionists, this is a great thing about alliance, is that when they're being attacked by both sides, it strengthens their argument. We're the uniters, we keep everybody in and going. But I think the real testing point for alliance on a unionist and nationalist scale is if the border poll ever comes, is how does it manage that? We will see the early onsets of that maybe from next year at the 2022 Stormont elections. Because if we go by what polls are saying, and this is more hypothetical talk, I'm not saying the polls are correct, is alliance would be bigger than the DUP, right? So will we then have a nationalist and other, makeup of Stormont when it comes to the executive and the ruling First Minister and Deputy First Minister? And I think you're going to have to make some very, very tough calls there. And I think you would alienate some voters either way. And I think the other problem and greatest asset to alliance is in mixed communities where nationalist voters know they can't outright vote for a nationalist, so they vote alliance because it's not a unionist party. And then for unionists, the same, vice versa. So I think, Matt, do you really want to add anything to that? I think I might have muddled up my point a bit there, but
I think you've done pretty well there in answering it. I think you've been fair. I think I think I think the change has been there for long enough in terms of like, I don't think they have, I think they've distanced themselves well enough from unionism and unionist ideas, and I think they've set out an identity for themselves. Because I think that's what's probably different. I do remember being 11, 12, whenever I kind of got introduced to politics. I think there was an idea of like, what is an alliance? What do alliance believe? What are they? What do they do? Why are they here? kind of approach. But I think now, they're a lot different now. I think they offer something. They offer something which is understandable, that is neither in terms of political ideology or political ideas or whatever way you want to say it. They offer something different from both, kind of the nationalist and the unionist options, which I think is interesting, and I think means that maybe just writing them down as like a soft unionist party is maybe becoming a wee bit more unfair, possibly. But yeah, I think it's a difficult question to answer, partially.
Yeah. I suppose kind of I know we're coming a bit short for time, but as well, one of the things, there's kind of two big possible radical changes kind of in the public conversation now. It's the idea of mandatory coalition, possibly, going out the window now that Alliance have kind of said we're in support of this. UUP are in support of it, DUP are in support of it, and whereas Nationalism is still kind of on the fence on it. Do you think, especially with this new Alliance surge, as much as I hate calling it that, the Alliance surge, do you think that's going to come about? Do you think we'll see that in the next election or the next couple?
I don't think you could get rid of mandatory coalition. It's only been 20 odd years since a very fragile peace agreement. I look at other countries, like take Kosovo, for example. Their peace agreement is even more fragile than ours. And, they went through talks of having a single government because it's mostly run by Albanians. And for the Serb community, it is awful because you're never going to get any motion passed through their parliament. And I fear here, if you do that, we go into the sectarian headcount all over again. Now, Alliance argue that it already is a sectarian headcount, but changes can be made. Yes, definitely. I'm all for updating the Good Friday Agreement. In my eyes, it is a living constitutional document for this part of the world. We need to update it, definitely, and there's things that need to be changed in it. But to get rid of mandatory coalition completely, I think it's too soon, honestly. I don't know if there is ever a right time for it. People will argue against me on that, and I would like to hear the arguments for it. So I don't know, Matt, what do you think there, really?
I think I agree. I think I've written on the Good Friday Agreement to put out my opinion that I think it's something that while I don't think that we're in a stage where we can just be like, let's start abandoning key parts of the Good Friday Agreement. I think we have to start looking at the alternatives to it. I think we need to start looking at the ways that we can change it slightly to hopefully better fit the current circumstances of Northern Irish politics. Things like a petition to concern clearly need addressed, and need addressed in a lot better ways than they currently are being. Whether that be that you need to have like an independent board who decide, is this actually a sectarian issue and stuff like that, maybe that could help. But I don't think you can realistically at this moment get away mandatory coalition. But at the same time, changes can be made. I think there's options there. But it's one where I do see the frustration because it's like, well, when do we get rid of this thing? What is the long-term time range that we have to wait, and when does it become acceptable?
I get Alliance's concerns about, well, if we keep classifying ourselves as unionist and nationalist, and these are the two ideologies that will always hold power, how are we going to move beyond this? And I really do understand the concern there, but we're 20 years on, and Stormont's collapsed how many times? It's still like, if you take the state of Northern Ireland, I think you sort of have to have its birth year really as 98. We're still too young in this process, and we still have a lot more to learn, especially when it comes to talking to each other, and especially maybe dealing with this new other category, because if they are pushed in a constitutional aspect, which way do they vote as well? It's a sad part about politics here, is that sadly I think the heart of it will always be that constitutional question. As much as we can try to avoid it, and like even on this site of BeyondNI, we try to avoid it at times, but I think it's sadly always going to be the undertone.
I suppose one other thing that I wanted to kind of ask you specifically with BeyondNI, is there a specific area of policy, specifically that you want to target and write about and discover and possibly make policy for? Is there one kind of area that you want to look at and possibly make change in, or kind of just focus on?
I think we've got we do have currently a plan or an idea of working on a loneliness strategy, and that's kind of something we see as very interesting and something that needs to be done. I think loneliness, it's a massive issue, and coming out of lockdown, I think it's going to be a massive issue. I think people take too lenient a view on it because we're still in the middle of it, but I think after it is going to be when we really see kind of how loneliness is affecting people. I think only recently it got announced that 1 in 4 students in the UK, and I believe this includes Northern Ireland, or university students, are either often or always lonely. That's like 1 in 4, university students. That's a massive amount of people. So I think that's one which we have specifically. But then I think we do have other things like environmental issues we're very concerned about. And James, do you have any others which you're feeling?
Infrastructure is sort of a big one for us as well.
Yeah.
I would like to see better trains in this part of the world, north, south, east, west. The Boris Tunnel, I am a fan of the idea, but I don't know how it could be executed. I'm not saying I'd support it, but I do like big infrastructure projects, and especially for rural areas here, internet connection is also very important. That sort of thing we're really interested in. I'm just trying. We've had some great guests on. Getting more women involved in politics was a big one for us. Loved it. Maybe also talking slightly about the constitutional question in a non-sectarian, not identity-driven way, just facts and figures. So I think that is what we're really always going to be interested in. But good policy that helps everybody in the society is always what we're going to be pushing.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to hit you with the hardest question you've asked me whenever I came on the show. So have you got any questions for me?
Oh, geez, that's a good one. I think probably one of the ones I think is probably a good one. It would be just to shoot it back at you is like, what's the kind of policy goals of Youth Voice, do you see, possibly?
Oh, well, I'm actually going to be setting up a working group to handle this. So this is my official announcement. Oof. But we're hoping to tackle like educational inequality.
Nice.
So from, looking at how grammar schools are unequal to non-grammars, and how Catholic, possibly the difference between Catholic, Protestant and non-denominational schools and as well regional inequality. So even not just the quality of schools and the different facilities available in different parts of the country, but also how do people get to school, whether it's, does everyone need to get a bus or a taxi, or how do you have to get in comparison with other parts of the country? So I suppose educational inequality, and I mean just policy is getting young people out there, getting our voices heard, I suppose, and hopefully votes at 16 if I can lobby enough people for it.
It's brilliant.
Go for it. I have one question for you. When are you replacing Nolan on the radio? Because I would get that change.
So I suppose the torpedo question that's about to shoot my career. No set date yet. I'll have to ask the BBC about that one, but you never know. Maybe in 20 years' time.
You never know.
The Dermot show.
Yes.
The Hamill show. That's it.
There we go. So unless you have any more questions, I think we'll wrap it up.
That's good to me.
Well, so thank you both for coming on. You've both been brilliant. Great chat. To everyone listening, thank you for listening. You can read our blog at www.youthvoiceni.com. You can catch our Twitter at youthvoiceni and our Instagram at youthvoice_ni. For anyone who now wants to get involved in the officially announced working group on educational inequality, you can contact me on either of the two social medias, or you can email me at dermot@youthvoiceni.com. I think that's the email. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you guys for coming on, and we'll see you all next time.